Thank you very much, Steve. Now, picking up on Steve's invitation, we're going to open it up for everyone here and ask that you offer your suggestions, not just for PCORI. Obviously, PCORI is a co-sponsor here and an important object of our attention, but also for ARC, for NIH, for FDA, for DoD, for the Veterans Administration, for the product developers, for all those involved in shaping the methods and the approaches for generating the knowledge that's needed for clinical decision making. So if you have one key take home that you want to leave the field with that we can follow up on, please offer it. And if you've got an actor involved, please indicate who you think that actor should be as well. Please.
Nancy Santinella, Merck Epidemiology. This is actually not a recommendation, but rather just for information, because we've heard several times now over 2 days about the registration of observational studies. I did want to inform people that in fact, most of the large pharmaceutical companies do register their observational safety studies on clinicaltrials.gov, although it is very, very difficult. The EMA has now moved to requiring all observational safety studies that are conducted in the EU to be registered. This is a requirement for the companies. Whether you're doing it as a commitment or requirement, you must register the studies. And they have developed a registry, and that is called NCEP. And so this is a much more friendly, user-friendly interface for observational studies. It would be great if everybody, not just industry, but also academics and anyone doing research and observational studies, as well as outcomes researchers, because right now what I'm talking about is mostly safety studies, but outcomes research is an area, you know, across academia and industry where I also think these types of studies, effectiveness studies or safety studies, need to be registered.
Thank you very much for that.
Sir, what was the spelling of that website? MCEP? Just say it.
Sorry, NCEP, ENCEPP.
Thank you.
And it's a requirement.
Thank you very much. Rich?
So, Richard Platt. So, it's just seconding Nancy's comment. We also put our observational studies on clinicaltrials.gov. I think the funders and the funders and the journals could solve this in an instant by requiring pre-registration of the things they fund or will publish. So I hope that, yeah.
Comment on that. One of the things that was funded under ARA is something called the Registry of Patient Registries, which is integrated into clinicaltrials.gov. It gets at some of the issues, but not all of the issues, because it's voluntary to link your observational studies that come off the registries. So it's an incomplete solution.
Right. It's just that.
Is there a group that's a part of clinicaltrials.gov or the work that you have underway that's looking specifically at ways to accelerate the progress here?
Yeah, so the Registry of Patient Registries is funded under ARA, and ARC has picked it up under the PCOR Trust Fund as part of dissemination. So it's entering its second year now. Right. It actually has more European registrants than U.S. registrants at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Good, thanks.
If I'm allowed two comments. One is about routinely collected electronic health data. I think all the comments in the past day and a half have been on target, but my own calibration is this. I think that during the past day and a half, we've probably given less credence to the value of claims data when married to the ability to do full text record review of selected patients than that resource deserves. And I think we may be overestimating the ease with which we'll be able to use electronic health record data. That experience comes from, I think many of us have shared the experience of using claims data when you're able to go back to full text records. And the huge advantage there, I'd say, are two. One, that typically there are defined populations for whom you have reason to believe that there's reasonably complete coverage for a defined period of time, something that current electronic health records don't have, which is a major drawback. And the second thing that we have just observed in the work we're doing with FDA, trying to take advantage of electronic health records that many of the many Sentinel data partners have is just how hard it is to extract simple information and standardize it. We've had a team that's been working for over a year trying to get its arms around laboratory test results and vital signs, among the simplest things you would think come out of electronic health records. And they're still standing, but they're bruised. And so I think we should just expect that it's not going to be as easy to use electronic health records as many of us hoped it would be. And we should have reasonable expectations, and in particular, not walk away from the things that claims data can contribute, even though they're not fully useful. The question is, are they fit for purpose? And for some purposes, they are. Last thing, if I can have the mic for another second, is the comments about PCORI actually engaging as an active partner with investigators to ensure the best possible research designs. It has a parallel in what the NIH Collaboratory is doing. There's a lot of post-award discussion between investigators and the sponsor. And Mike, I hope I'm within bounds saying I'm confident that the Collaboratory would look forward to finding ways to marry those two kinds of activities between PCORI and the Collaboratory.
I see Mike shaking his head in acknowledgement. Actually, thank you, Rich. Just one comment that was triggered by your comment on EHRs in support of Mary's observation. As I noted to her during the break, there is a related IOM study that's being started now. It's not specifically targeted to this question, but will have relevant consequences, and it's to develop core metrics for what we're calling the quadruple aim: better care, better health, lower costs, and patient experience, with the intent of identifying at least one element of those core metrics for embedding in electronic health records. Yes.
Hi, Sean Hennessy from Penn. I'd like to make 2 quick points. First, Steve Goodman pointed to the sensitivity of data mining approaches for identifying adverse drug events. I think Steve would agree that the issue with data mining isn't sensitivity, but specificity. Probably all of those were in the AIRS database. If you predict enough things, some of them are bound to be true, so we need to figure out good ways to evaluate the specificity as well. That's challenging given the lack of known negatives. My second point is in follow-up to Gene Slutsky's observation that a single study is rarely sufficient basis to change clinical practice widely. On the other hand, both ARC and PCORI are asking researchers to disseminate their findings into practice as soon as they have them. I know that investigators aren't always the most circumspect people with regard to how their research ought to be implemented, and I'm wondering whether some of the ways, one of the ways that PCORI might get into trouble is over implementation of results that shouldn't quite be implemented yet.
Jean, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so you bring a really good point, and what we've always emphasized is who do you disseminate the results to? So single study results, unless they're really remarkably definitive, I think are of great use to other researchers as well as people who are in training. But I don't think they're necessarily, grist for the general public. So we have to be smarter about who we're disseminating what to and what impact we expect to have. So I would think that studies that are hypothesis generating should be disseminated to other funding agencies, other researchers who can use these results to make decisions about what their next study is going to be or what body of research they want to continue to fund. So I would agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, Joe. Yes.
Just to clarify something that Sean said, PCORI specifically does not admonish applicants to talk about how they would disseminate their findings. We specifically say assess the potential, but do not spend a penny planning to disseminate, recognizing with the advice of the methodology committee that both many of the studies won't be worthy of disseminating, won't be ready for dissemination, and secondly, that the people doing the study are not necessarily the disseminators. So we clearly don't tell applicants to plan to disseminate. What we do instead is we say assess the potential for dissemination, tell us about what you perceive as opportunities should the findings warrant it, and engage with those who would participate in the dissemination early on. So have those folks at the table, but we definitely don't say.
Joe, could you stay at the mic for just one more second and comment on what PCORI is going to be doing then with respect to the body of evidence in a particular area as the stewards of that body of evidence?
Well, yes, 2013 is a year in which, among many other things, the broad dissemination plan is being developed, and it's being developed in collaboration with ARC precisely because, as Gene said, some of the PCORI Trust Fund dollars go to ARC for dissemination, and we need to jointly figure out what that means and how we're going to do it. I'll only emphasize again that if the model of dissemination is let's wait till we get results, see if they deserve dissemination, and then begin the process. If that's the extant model, we're trying to augment it with a prospective approach which says have the people who would do the dissemination engaged early on as well. Not that it replaces the need for those post hoc efforts, but we think that has potential to enhance chances for dissemination. But the dissemination plan is being developed this year.
Thank you. Shelley?
Mike,
Shelley Greenfield,
Oh,
I want
sorry.
to further.
sorry,
One
Shelley.
quick comment.
I
Yes,
just
please.
wanted to make a comment, not about dissemination, but about synthesis. I think synthesis of observational evidence is much more difficult than synthesis of randomized trial evidence. And I think it will be important for us to learn better ways of synthesis of observational studies. And also, people who synthesize observational studies may need to have better access to raw data when they are synthesizing such evidence.
Thank you, Cindy.
Shelley Greenfield, I actually want to further this discussion and go back to something that Steve Goodman talked about, asking researchers to actually enlarge their picture by doing, if there's a trial, add on a piece. And I wonder whether that could be taken a step further, which is to create a family of studies, if you will, with the goal in mind that downstream, as Joel Greenhouse pointed out, that clinical practice guideline makers and systematic reviewers are going to be able to have enough of the right kinds of studies so that 4 years from now, they'll be able to make a statement. In other words, 2 of this kind and 2 of that kind, or something like that. Is that too much? Is that too much planning in a world in which we love the R01 notion, or because otherwise the comments have just been made in the last 5 minutes about synthesizing data, disseminating data, multiple studies aren't going to get any better than they are right now.
Steve?
Boy, I think, as in political systems, there has to be there has to be a balance between allowing investigators to come up with the ideas that they come up with and central control. Central control can stifle as much as it can encourage. So I think that I don't have an immediate answer, but PCORI, and I would include NIH and ARC, need to be, I think, vigilant. In many ways, this is how journals operate. They get 2 papers on the same subject. They don't necessarily commission them, but then they see an opportunity to put them together and make a coherent commentary, pairing, whatever. I think that depending on what PCORI gets, it can use that opportunity to perhaps potentially bring investigators together who work in the same field, standardize measures. The idea of prospective meta-analysis has been played out in many domains where a bunch of folks who are doing essentially different studies agree to measure certain outcomes and exposures in common ways to make later synthesis based on individual patient data easier. And PCORI, as well as NIH, can take the initiative by convening conferences to help standardize these measures across bodies of research. So I do think there are many opportunities, both opportunistic and also actively taking the lead in identifying those key areas where the lack of standardized measures or the lack of good crosstalk between the RCTs or observational studies are inhibiting progress. So I think we can. I think it's a great suggestion. I think PCORI and other funding agencies can do it without being too dictatorial, and start establishing the infrastructure, both intellectual and substantive, for research in high priority areas to go forward efficiently.
Thank you, Steve. Mike, would you like to comment on that?
I totally agree with that. One potential opportunity we have right now is the budget crisis, and the budget crisis means that we have to be even more picky about how we spend our money than ever. So with all kinds of platforms becoming available, and including right now the PCORI platform, which is going to become available and which is specifically calling for data standardization, one could imagine a situation where we as a funding agency would say the only kinds of studies that we want to fund are those that are rigorous, and rigorous means this. Rigorous means that you will take advantage of standardized data platforms so that the results will be generalizable. And what that does is it creates an economic incentive for the key players in the research community to get together and do what needs to be done.
Thank you, Mike. Yes.
I'd like to make two comments, one about data quality, another one about selective reporting of outcomes. We've been talking here a lot about bias, and bias has meant really confounding, which is great. It's what I do. I think it's an important topic. I don't want to disencourage anyone to fund research on methods to better deal with confounding. I hope to put my kids through college by doing that. But
And you've got a T-shirt for them.
But I have a T-shirt now. So data quality and the selective reporting of multiple comparisons may be as important or more important as confounding. The problem is that we don't really know. And we don't really know because there is not much research going on those topics. So I would encourage any funder to pay attention to research on the importance of biases due to both poor data quality and the selective reporting of multiple comparisons. We had to wait until Cindy made these comments to really have these two things here in the conference, where they may be as important as the other biases. Now, for data quality, there could be research on how different ways of, or whether having a very systematic way of measuring things or some validation studies, etc., actually have any impact on the results. And there are some studies that have looked at this, but not in a systematic way. So having a funder here, this offers an opportunity to have some systematic research program to look at how important data quality really is for these things. Should we just take things from claims databases and use it as the outcome, or should we go to a 10% random sample and check those outcomes? That is for data quality. For the selective reporting of multiple comparisons, this might be the biggest problem that we have in observational research now. That we have no data, or almost no data, on how important this problem is. I don't think that the concept of registration is something you can apply to observational studies I mean, you can do it for some things, but it is not going to work and some people have written about these issues. There was a special discussion about this in the journal Epidemiology last year. Most of the discussions came against that. One very important reason why this may not work for observational studies as it works for trials is that for trials, when you register the trial, you don't have the data yet. But for observational studies, if you are going to do a new analysis of observational data, you may have the data already in front of you. So who's stopping you from only going to register those things you have already checked?
Well, and in fact, there are apps being developed for popular access to databases.
Right. So, but there must be other ways in which we can quantify the magnitude of the problem of selective reporting of multiple comparisons in observational studies. One way may be by asking all the authors of observational studies to just check some boxes saying, do you have access to the data before you wrote the research grant? Do you have access to the data, or your co-authors, or things like, can you just put as an electronic appendix the research grant that you wrote, etc. So someone can check, and if funders or journals were making this type of requirements, maybe in 5 or 10 years we have enough data to check whether people who are reporting things that are very different from the ones that are in the research grants are giving something that is very different.
Thank you, Miguel. We have several journals represented here, and we'll obviously disseminate these observations to journals too. Nancy?
Actually, this is what came up with the International Society for Pharmacoepidemiology. There was quite a debate between those who wanted to register and those who didn't. And most of the time, it was people who just went into the data, looked for something, and then they decided to publish, or, without a protocol. And I actually don't agree with that. I think that if you're going to ask a question, first, even if you have the data in front of you, I believe that you should write a protocol, ask a scientific question, have a data analytic plan. You don't know how many times I get people calling me and saying, oh, we looked at your drug and we found this. And I say, oh, great, can you share with me the protocol? Oh, we don't have a protocol. Okay, I personally think you need a protocol.
Thank you very much. Just for the time reference points, we have until 12:15. We don't need to go until that point. We will stop at that point sharp. Our co-chairs have a few minutes of comments each, but we'll be done before the scheduled end of the time. Hal?
Hal Sox from Dartmouth. So the Affordable Care Act put a real stress on PCORI because it said it had to set research priorities, it had to formulate a project agenda consisting of research questions, presumably pertinent to its mission, and then to give potential applicants some idea about the preferred research methods. That's in sharp contrast to the investigator-initiated model, and why the Congress decided to do that is, I don't know. So a quick update. Last week, Cindy and I and others were involved in the advisory panel on prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. And our first task was to sort of decide which of 20 research topic areas like multiple sclerosis or coronary disease are the ones that are the most important, and PCORI provided us with some criteria to help us do that job, and I think we did that pretty tidily with a very vigorous discussion. Then Dave Hickam asked us to think about what type of studies are most suitable to meet the mission of PCORI, and things really quieted down at that point, and I know my mind was just going blank and trying to figure out how to decide that. But that's what's coming up next. And I'm hoping that what we've learned here today will help us both with process, but also how we're actually going to go about it, or PCORI's going to go about it, engaging members of the research community so as not to lose some of the spontaneity of the investigator-initiated approach, and yet doing it in a way that maximizes the efficiency of getting studies that are really going to put PCORI on the map to stay.
Thank you, Hal. I think you've more than earned the $5 that Joe slipped you to put in the plea for help in that respect.
Bill Weintraub from Christiana. One of the sub-themes here has been quality of data, so I just want to briefly address the importance of registries, in particular registries from professional societies. Some of them are particularly powerful with essentially 100% penetrance. So virtually everybody that's getting coronary surgery, virtually everybody that's getting PCI, virtually everyone that's getting ICDs in our country are in these registries, and they're becoming international as well. They're using highly structured data that are put together by committees of the best and the brightest. There are also data sets that have not yet in registries. In particular, we published a paper on the top 100 in cardiovascular medicine, which goes to Mary's point about let's at least collect what we think is really important. We can also hook these registries to administrative data, getting the best of both, along the lines of what Rich suggested of using administrative data more wisely. These registries have gotten substantial research support from NHLBI, FDA, and CMS for comparative effectiveness studies. One of the problems with them is they're non-scalable. Almost all of these data are collected independently of EHRs, and that can't go on. So we're working very hard, in particular with the Pinnacle Outpatient Registry, to get that embedded in EHRs. Where's the opportunity here for PCORI and for ARC is we would all like to see this broadened outside of the cardiovascular space. There's some, but the cardiologists and the cardiothoracic surgeons have done the best in this, and we would like to see work towards getting these registries embedded in EHRs, because the data respondent burden is unbearable otherwise.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, last word.
Patrick Ryan, Johnson & Johnson. I just, reflecting on the last panel and connecting a couple pieces together, we heard from Rich that there's a need to recognize the opportunity for using claims data. We also need to recognize the opportunity for EHR, and Miguel made an important point that data quality is going to be part of this. But to a certain extent, it's not about a data source being good or bad. It's about the validity of the analysis being performed on the data for the question and purpose, which I think is really where Cindy was going in terms of trying to focus our efforts. And going back to Michael's earlier presentation, if we think of job number one as predictive accuracy, or more generically, if job number one is generating the highest quality evidence possible, we need to figure out a framework for how we evaluate that when a particular method's applied to a particular data source, how much can we believe the result that is generated? And so I think that there's an opportunity to bridge together the data and the analytics to actually have an overall framework for evaluation, rather than thinking about putting together the best data or putting together the best minds and methodology, but instead forcing that to be a community together.
When you say a framework, Patrick, are you referring to an algorithm of some kind, a set of decision rules, or are you referring to a process, or both?
So specifically, to answer the question of whether or not a particular data source is suitable for individual treatment responses, it's not adequate to ask the question of, is claims the right data or EHR the right data? But instead the question is, when applying a method to any given data source, how well does it actually work? And we should be using evidence that we can generate from the data as the basis for deciding on those decision rules for what should we trust and what should be publishable.
I think I just want to say that was, I think, one of my main points, that we should always be thinking with every study how we can add that component. So every study is informative not only about the medical question, but adds a key piece to our methods understanding. So I think it's a really important point you're making.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Steve. Any other comments from our panelists, Jean or Cindy? Well, if we could close with a hand for the panelists and for yourselves for the contributions. The ledger remains open for strategies to come, but let me now turn the floor back to our co-chairs. And who's going first? Joe? Ralph?